Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. The Florida sun blazed over my 7 acres of hard-won freedom when the first letter arrived, a friendly invite from the Cypress Bend HOA. I laughed and tore it up. Big mistake. Within days, my quiet paradise turned into a battlefield, and I was about to show them I don't back down. I remember the day I first pulled into my new driveway like it was yesterday. The Florida sun was spilling gold over the 7 acres of land I had finally claimed as my own. After years of working as a security systems specialist, designing surveillance setups for government facilities and corporate compounds, I was done babysitting other people's messes. I wanted a quiet place, a sanctuary. The property had once been an old workshop, all concrete and rust, but I saw potential in every cracked beam and dented steel door. Months of back-breaking renovation turned it into a modern home with a personal stamp on every inch of it. The concrete driveway was my pride, laid by hand, polished and sealed to withstand the swampy Florida weather. When I stepped out of my truck that day, I felt like I had won. The nearest sign of civilization was a brand new development called Cypress Bend, just down the road. From the first moment I saw it, I knew it wasn't my crowd. Perfectly clipped lawns, identical pastel houses, and a certain sterile vibe that screamed homeowners association rules. I wasn't against neighbors, but I had zero interest in paying fees to some self-appointed committee for the privilege of being told what color I could paint my garage. Thankfully, my property line sat just outside their jurisdiction. Technically, we were neighbors, but legally, they couldn't tell me a damn thing. The first week after I moved in was blissfully quiet. I'd work remotely from my office with the big bay window overlooking the trees, drink my coffee on the porch at sunrise, and listen to the sound of cicadas buzzing like lazy electric wires. At night, I'd tinker in the garage or walk the property with my dog, making mental notes about where I'd plant a small orchard next spring. My only nod to my old life as a security consultant was the camera system I'd installed around the perimeter, a setup so subtle and advanced that you could walk the grounds all day and never spot a single lens. Old habits die hard. 2 weeks after moving in, the first envelope showed up. It was sitting crooked in my mailbox, the logo of the Cypress Bend HOA printed in cheerful green letters. I opened it on the porch with a grin, half expecting some welcome basket coupon or local discount flyer. Instead, it read like a sales pitch: join our exclusive community and enjoy shared amenities, neighborhood security, and architectural harmony. There were even bullet points about maintaining the neighborhood's reputation and building lasting friendships. I chuckled, crumpled it, and tossed it into the trash. The next week, another letter came, this time with a more assertive tone. It was all friendly reminder and limited time opportunity, but you could feel the pressure between the lines. They wanted me in, and not just as a friendly suggestion. I ignored it again, figuring they'd move on. A few days later, I got a third letter, and this one made me stop and read it twice. The language had changed. It mentioned continuing to live in the area with proper membership and ensuring compliance with our community standards. That last phrase made my jaw tighten. I wasn't part of their community. They had no standards that applied to me. I might as well have received a letter from Mars demanding I repaint my roof. I grabbed my property documents, scanned them into a single PDF, and typed a polite but firm response. It read, "I am not part of your HOA. I hold legal ownership of my property, which lies outside your jurisdiction. Any further attempts to pressure me will be considered harassment and will be reported accordingly." I even sent a hard copy by certified mail just so they couldn't claim ignorance. That evening, as I was tightening a new fixture on the porch, I noticed a group of people standing on the sidewalk at the edge of my land. 3 of them, 2 men and a woman. They weren't trespassing, not technically, but they stood just far enough to avoid trouble, whispering and pointing in my direction. One of them was a woman with a perfectly styled haircut that could cut glass. She had that president of something look, the type that makes you instinctively check if your shirt is tucked in. When she noticed me looking, she gave a polite wave that felt more like an inspection than a greeting. I waved back, mostly to see her face twitch when I didn't approach. Later that night, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, thinking about that letter. Most people would laugh and shrug it off, but something about their tone stuck with me. I wasn't the type to get pushed around, not anymore. The way I saw it, Cypress Bend could stay on their side of the line, and I'd stay on mine. Still, the sight of that woman and her companions gnawed at me. Something told me this wasn't the last time I'd hear from them. The next letter arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered this time, tucked under my doormat like some ominous calling card. I recognized the Cypress Bend logo immediately. This one wasn't a polite invitation or a sales pitch. The tone was colder, with phrases like failure to comply and mandatory review of residency eligibility. There was even a veiled threat. Residents who refuse membership may face legal consequences regarding continued occupancy. My coffee went cold in my hand as I read it. The arrogance of it made my blood simmer. I wasn't part of their HOA. I had no contract, no agreement, no connection to their absurd rules. They might as well have sent me a fine for breathing. I called their listed office number, expecting some flustered receptionist, but instead, I got the voice of Karen Tully, the HOA president herself. I could almost see her immaculate hair through the phone line, each strand lacquered into a helmet of superiority. "Mr. Barkley," she said, as if I had already done something wrong, "we've been trying to reach you. Your lack of membership is becoming a matter of concern for the community." I took a deep breath, forcing my tone to stay calm. "Mrs. Tully, I live on private land. I'm not in your community. My property predates Cypress Bend, and your association has no legal hold over me." There was a pause, a moment of sharp, brittle silence. Then her voice sharpened like broken glass. "It would be wise to reconsider, Mr. Barkley. Our community thrives on unity, and those who choose to isolate themselves often find life becomes difficult." That last word hung in the air like a threat. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "If you think you can intimidate me, Karen, you're welcome to try. Just know that I'm not the type to back down." I hung up before she could reply. The next morning, I found a glossy HOA pamphlet wedged into my mailbox, along with a handwritten note. The note, in tight feminine cursive, read, "It's not too late to do the right thing. Join us, and we can avoid any unpleasantness." My first thought was that this woman had watched too many mob movies. My second thought was that she had no idea who she was dealing with. I drafted a formal response that evening, scanned and printed on thick paper to give it extra weight. I included copies of my property deed, boundary maps, and county records. My letter was short but final. Any future contact of this nature will be treated as harassment and escalated to county authorities. You have no jurisdiction over my land, my home, or my life. I made sure it was signed, notarized, and sent by certified mail. For a few days, things went quiet. I spent my mornings working, my afternoons maintaining the property, and my evenings tinkering with the solar lights lining my driveway. It felt like a calm after a storm, the kind of silence that doesn't bring relief but makes you tense because you know something is coming. One afternoon, as I was adjusting a motion sensor floodlight on the garage, I noticed a white SUV idling near the end of my driveway. It wasn't blocking anything, but the engine was running and someone was watching. I grabbed a rag, wiped my hands, and walked to the edge of my property. Through the windshield, I saw the same woman I'd spotted earlier, Karen Tully, wearing oversized sunglasses and a sharp, tailored blouse that looked entirely out of place in the humid Florida air. She rolled down her window with deliberate slowness. "Mr. Barkley," she said, her voice sugary and poisonous all at once, "you're making things more complicated than they need to be. We're offering you a seat at the table." "Why insist on sitting alone?" "Because I own my table," I replied, leaning slightly on the fence post, "and I don't let people I don't trust dictate what I can do on my own land." Her smile tightened. "You'll regret this stubbornness. We always find a way to maintain order." With that, she rolled the window back up and drove off, her SUV kicking up a trail of dust like a final insult. I watched her leave, every instinct in me prickling. I had dealt with bullies before, but this woman had the polished confidence of someone who believed they were untouchable. I walked back to the garage, my mind already turning. If she wanted to play games, I'd be ready. I woke up the next morning to the sound of gravel crunching under my tires, but I hadn't moved my truck. When I stepped outside with my mug of coffee, I saw the front left tire sagging like a deflated balloon. At first, I thought it might be bad luck. Maybe I had picked up a nail somewhere. But when I walked closer, the answer was staring at me. A rough wooden plank lay across the end of my driveway, bristling with thick nails hammered upright, like some medieval booby trap. The morning sun glinted off the metal tips, each one waiting to punch through rubber. I crouched down, inspecting it, and noticed scuffs in the dirt, clear signs it had been placed there deliberately, not by accident. My jaw clenched. I rolled the tire up onto blocks and spent the better part of the hour patching it, my coffee growing cold as I muttered under my breath. It didn't take a genius to guess who would stoop to this. Cypress Bend had decided to escalate. I could almost hear Karen Tully's smug voice. Life becomes difficult for those who isolate themselves. Well, I was starting to see what she meant. The next day, I returned from a hardware store run and found a second board, this time tucked under my front wheel like some sadistic gift. I checked the surrounding area, but whoever had left it was long gone. I wasn't surprised. People like this didn't want direct confrontations. They wanted you to bend, to fold under constant irritation. 2 days later, I found my mailbox lying face down in the ditch. The wooden post was split clean through, as if someone had hit it with a bat. The following night, I discovered a fresh gouge running the full length of my garage door, a deep, deliberate scratch that had cut through the paint and into the metal. It was clear now. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a message. That night, I sat in my living room with the monitors from my security system spread across the coffee table. Most people wouldn't know what to look for, but I'd spent years building surveillance rigs that could spot a raccoon at 100 yards. At exactly 2 in the morning, I found what I was looking for. The infrared camera near the driveway picked up 2 figures creeping in from the road. They wore dark hoodies and reflective safety vests with the words HOA maintenance printed across the back. I recognized the shape of the truck they drove, a black Ford with a dent in the rear bumper. One man carried a board loaded with nails, while the other kept glancing over his shoulder like a kid stealing candy. They laid the trap carefully, then hustled back to the truck, headlights off as they rolled away. I replayed the footage 3 times, leaning closer with every pass. The second man's face caught a sliver of moonlight just as he looked up at the camera. It was enough. I had seen him once before. He was the so-called territory inspector from Cypress Bend, a guy Karen had introduced during our brief run-in at the property line. I didn't call the police. Not yet. My instinct was to let my anger take over, to storm into that development and dump the board right on Karen's doorstep. But I knew better. You don't win against people like this with shouting matches. You win by gathering the kind of proof that no judge can ignore. I spent the next day upgrading my surveillance setup. I hid a new camera high up in an oak tree overlooking the driveway, its lens small enough to escape notice even from someone standing directly beneath it. I added a second unit behind the mailbox area and a motion-activated light rig on the roofline of the garage. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd turn my property into a chessboard they couldn't see. That night, I sat in the dark sipping strong black coffee, waiting. And sure enough, at 2:13 in the morning, the black Ford rolled up again. The same 2 men slipped out, this time carrying 2 boards instead of 1. They moved quickly, placing them near the slope of the driveway. I smiled grimly as my cameras captured everything. Their faces, their truck plates. The exact moment one of them gave a nervous laugh and muttered, "Karen's gonna love this." I leaned back in my chair, letting the anger settle into something colder, sharper. They had just given me more than I needed. I didn't sleep much that night, not out of fear, but because my mind was already in work mode, the way it used to get when I was troubleshooting a high-security facility. I woke before dawn, brewed an extra strong pot of coffee, and spent hours scrubbing through the footage frame by frame. I pulled still images, zoomed in on faces, and enhanced license plate numbers. Every detail mattered. By the time the sun rose, I had a small but solid dossier of evidence. Time-stamped videos of the black Ford, clear shots of the men's reflective vests, even a snippet of audio where one muttered, "This guy thinks he's untouchable." I decided not to rush to the sheriff just yet. People like Karen were too good at weaseling out of consequences. No, I wanted a mountain of evidence, not a handful of pebbles. So I upgraded my setup again. I added 2 more cameras, this time with infrared night vision so sharp you could see the sweat on someone's face. I also wired a couple of high-frequency microphones around the driveway and mailbox area. These weren't your standard consumer mics. They could pick up a whispered conversation from 20 feet away. That evening, I parked my truck at a different angle to bait them, tires just far enough down the driveway to tempt them into planting another trap. Then I waited. And sure enough, like clockwork, the black Ford returned at 2:06 in the morning. I watched from my monitor as they tiptoed across my driveway, laying down another nail-rigged board with the kind of care you'd expect from someone handling explosives. But this time, I captured something better. The microphone hidden in the oak tree caught them talking. The first man muttered, "Karen said to keep this up. He'll join if we make it annoying enough." The second laughed nervously. "This guy's got cameras, you know. Maybe we shouldn't push it." The first snapped back. She said to apply pressure. Her words, "Just do it." When they drove off, I downloaded the footage and saved the audio file twice, once to an encrypted drive and once to the cloud. This was the kind of evidence that didn't just stop harassment, it ended careers. The next day, I made a few changes around the property. I replaced the locks on all the gates and added heavy-duty deadbolts to the garage. I installed motion-triggered floodlights that lit up like stadium lights the second anything moved within 20 feet of the house. As I worked, I couldn't help but smirk at the idea of those two idiots creeping around in the dark, suddenly caught in a beam of blinding light. That night, I took it a step further. I set up a new camera, one specifically angled to catch license plates, and rigged a silent alert system to my phone. If anyone stepped onto my driveway, I'd know in real time. Around midnight, while I was reviewing some footage, the alert went off. I switched to the live feed and saw something I hadn't expected. This time, it wasn't the two men. It was Karen herself. She stood just beyond the edge of my driveway, arms crossed, scanning my property like she was inspecting troops. She was talking quietly to someone on the phone, but the mic picked up enough. "Yes, he's being stubborn. No, we'll make him come around." "Don't worry." Then, as if to add insult to injury, she walked up to my mailbox, yanked out some of my mail, looked at it, and tossed it back before storming off. I saved every second of it. It was the first time I'd seen her so directly involved, and I wasn't going to waste it. The next day, I started compiling everything into a neat folder, labeling dates and times. I also set up a second drive with an automatic backup in case someone decided to get clever and damage my equipment. I wasn't just collecting evidence anymore, I was building a case. The first sign that things were about to escalate even further came on a warm Thursday evening. I was out by the garage, tightening the bolts on my fence gate, when I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel. Not the hurried steps of someone passing by, but a slow, deliberate walk. Someone who wanted to be seen. I straightened up, rag still in hand, and there he was. The HOA's vice president, a stocky guy in his 50s with a smug grin plastered across his face. He stopped just short of my property line, as if standing on that invisible border gave him power. "Evening," he called out, in that falsely friendly tone that makes you instantly distrust a man. "Name's Bill. We need to talk about your, attitude problem." I raised an eyebrow. "My what?" "You've been ignoring our letters, ignoring Karen, and now you're making a big fuss over nothing. Look, no one wants this to get ugly. Join the association, pay your dues, and all this unpleasantness stops." He gestured vaguely toward my driveway, like the slashed tires and broken mailbox were just natural disasters instead of deliberate acts of harassment. I walked closer, my rag still stained with grease, and gave him a long, steady look. "Bill, I've got video of your maintenance boys dropping boards with nails across my driveway. I could have the sheriff out here in 10 minutes. His smile faltered for just a second, then came back tighter. "Don't get dramatic. You're outside our HOA now, but you won't want to be outside forever. Things can get complicated for people who don't cooperate." I didn't answer. I just let the silence stretch between us until it became uncomfortable, then reached casually into my pocket and hit the record button on my phone. "Are you threatening me, Bill?" I asked. "Of course not," he said quickly, but his eyes gave him away. "I'm just saying, Karen likes to keep the neighborhood orderly. She's got influence. You'd be smart to be on her good side." "Yeah," I said, nodding slowly. "I'll keep that in mind." He left after that, his smile replaced by a scowl as he muttered something under his breath. The second he turned the corner, I saved the recording and uploaded it to my private cloud. It wasn't much, but it was another brick in the wall I was building against them. Later that night, I found something new waiting for me. A stack of HOA flyers had been left at the foot of my driveway. Each one had a picture of my house, a photo clearly taken from the street, with the words "Does not comply" printed in bold red letters. There was also a note scrawled in pen across the top. "Don't ruin the neighborhood. Join us." I crumpled the papers and tossed them into the trash, but a strange chill crept up my spine. These people weren't just trying to intimidate me. They were trying to turn the community against me, painting me as some kind of problem neighbor. The next evening, I spotted the black Ford again, slowly rolling past the end of my driveway. This time, the passenger had a phone out, clearly recording video. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down to the gate, shining the beam right into their windshield. The truck sped off with a squeal of tires, but not before I caught a good glimpse of the passenger's face, one of the same guys from the nailboard stunt. Enough was enough. I spent the next day installing another layer of cameras, disguising them as decorative lanterns along the driveway. I even added a small but powerful microphone behind a fake birdhouse to catch conversations near the road. If they wanted to keep playing games, I was going to record every second of it. That night, as I reviewed the footage from the previous evening, I heard something chilling on the microphone near the road. Karen's voice, clear as day, speaking to someone from her SUV. "If he's not with us, he's against us. Keep the pressure on him. Do what you need to do." I sat back in my chair, the audio looping in my head. That was no longer just harassment. That was an order, and now I had it on tape. The next morning, I decided to stop playing defense and start laying the groundwork for a proper counterattack. I sat down at my kitchen table with a fresh pot of coffee, my laptop, and a flash drive full of footage that would make any HOA lawyer choke on their morning bagel. First, I organized everything into a clear timeline. The first threatening letters, the nail boards, the vandalism, Bill's little visit, and now Karen's voice giving direct orders. I even annotated the clips with the exact times and locations, leaving no room for misunderstandings. Once the timeline was solid, I called an old colleague from my security days, Daniel Harris, now working as a legal investigator for a private law firm. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he picked up on the second ring. After hearing the basics, he whistled. "You've got yourself a full-blown harassment and property damage case, Kev. Don't just sit on this. Build a proper case file and make them pay." I took his advice. I spent the entire day combing through every camera angle I had, pulling screenshots and creating audio clips. Then I went a step further. I installed a high-resolution license plate camera facing the road, hidden in a decorative post light. I also placed a trail cam behind some shrubs near the edge of my property. If they came again, I'd know not just what they did, but exactly where they came from. That night, I deliberately parked my truck in the same spot as before, close enough to the driveway entrance to make it an inviting target. I left the lights off and sat in my office with the monitor feeds glowing. Around 2:09, the familiar black Ford appeared again, rolling in with the headlights off like some half-baked covert operation. This time, the two men split up. One of them placed a nail board near my rear tires while the other crouched by the side of the garage, fiddling with something. When I zoomed in, I almost couldn't believe it. The guy was loosening the lug nuts on my rear wheel. If I'd driven off in the morning without checking, the wheel could have come off on the highway. My blood went ice cold. I let the cameras record every second, even as my hands itched to storm outside and confront them. Instead, I waited until they left, taking their sweet time as if this was just another night on the job. By morning, I had crystal clear footage of the sabotage. I immediately replaced the tampered wheel and stored the lug nuts as evidence. Then I downloaded the entire night's recording, backing it up on 2 separate drives and uploading a copy to the cloud. That kind of evidence was enough to move things from harassment to criminal charges. Later in the day, I caught something even better. My microphone near the mailbox picked up a conversation between Karen and one of the men. Her tone was cold, authoritative. "Don't stop until he either joins or cracks. Make it inconvenient for him to say no. And be careful. Don't get caught." The man replied, "This guy's got cameras all over." Karen's laugh was short and sharp. "Then disable them or find another way. Just make it happen." I saved the audio file and sent a copy to Daniel. He called me back within an hour. "Kev, this isn't just harassment anymore. This is organized vandalism, and that recording is conspiracy. You need to take this to the county sheriff. Now." I agreed, but I wasn't going to rush in blind. I wanted one more night of proof, one more piece of irrefutable evidence that would bury them. I swapped my regular mailbox for a reinforced steel one and installed another hidden camera inside it, pointing toward the road. It was overkill maybe, but I wasn't about to let them pull any last tricks. That night, I sat in my office again, sipping bitter black coffee and watching the feed like a hawk. The air was heavy and still, the kind of silence you only hear before something happens. That night, I didn't have to wait long for something to happen. At exactly 2:15 in the morning, the black Ford rolled up once again, creeping down the road like a predator that thinks it owns the hunt. This time, I didn't just watch. I called Daniel and patched him into the live feed. "Get your screenshots ready," I whispered into the phone as I hit record. The two men stepped out, one of them carrying another nail-studded board. They moved with less caution than before, maybe feeling cocky from not being caught yet. But my cameras caught every angle. The plates, their faces, even the nervous way the second guy kept glancing toward the house. Then, for reasons I'll never understand, the first man decided to get creative. He started dragging a crowbar along the edge of my garage door, leaving a loud screech of metal. That was the final straw. I called the sheriff's department while the vandalism was still happening. When the dispatcher asked if I had evidence, I said, "I've got video, audio, license plates, and timestamps. Tell your officers to hurry. They're still here." I stepped out onto the porch with my phone camera rolling. The motion lights flared on, flooding the driveway with harsh white light. The two men froze like deer in headlights, one of them dropping the board. "Evening, gentlemen," I said, my voice colder than the metal crowbar scraping my garage. "Enjoying your night shift?" They bolted for the truck. I stayed on the porch, camera trained on them, narrating every detail into the phone for the dispatcher. A sheriff's cruiser arrived faster than I expected, less than 10 minutes, and cut them off down the road. From my porch, I watched the flashing blue and red lights and felt the first real wave of satisfaction I'd had in weeks. The deputies took my statement right there, reviewing the footage on my laptop. One of them, a tall guy with a military buzz cut, shook his head and muttered, "This is some next-level HOA nonsense." They confiscated the crowbar and nail boards, cuffed the two men, and promised to dig deeper into who had sent them. I didn't have to guess. Karen's voice was already etched into my audio files, giving orders like some suburban mob boss. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Alvarez, who had been assigned to the case. He asked me to come down to the station with all my evidence. I arrived with a hard drive and a folder so thick it could have doubled as a brick. Alvarez watched the footage, his face unreadable until he finally leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Barkley, this isn't just property damage. This is conspiracy to commit harm. Whoever is behind this, we're going to find them." 2 days later, one of the arrested men cracked under questioning. He confessed that Karen Tully had ordered every act of vandalism. She wanted to teach me a lesson, in his words, and make me understand community compliance. He even admitted they had been paid out of HOA funds, community money used to terrorize a neighbor who wasn't even a member. That was all the leverage the police needed. They set up a sting, with hidden patrol cars stationed near my property to catch any more activity. I didn't sleep much that night, pacing the living room and watching the monitors like a man waiting for a storm. It came right on schedule. Around 1:50 in the morning, an SUV rolled up. Not the black Ford this time, but Karen's silver Lexus. She stepped out, clipboard in hand, and started walking up my driveway as if she owned it. What she didn't know was that 2 deputies were waiting just beyond the tree line. They moved in as soon as she bent down to place something on my mailbox. A fresh stack of threatening notes and another board with nails. When they cuffed her, I stepped out onto the porch. Karen's face was pale, her perfect hair glinting under the harsh lights. She didn't say a word, but the look she gave me was enough to know this wasn't over. Not for her. The news of Karen's arrest spread faster than wildfire. By the next afternoon, half the neighborhood had heard that the president of Cypress Bend HOA had been caught trespassing on private property with a bag of nail-studded boards. I knew this because I saw them. The same neighbors who once walked by with tight smiles, now slowing their cars near my driveway, whispering and pointing. For the first time, I wasn't the outsider. Karen was. Detective Alvarez called me later that day, his voice carrying a tone of grim satisfaction. "She's not talking much, but we found enough on her phone to keep her busy. Messages, instructions to her crew, even screenshots of your property with notes like, 'Apply pressure here.'" He paused, then added, "We're also digging into HOA financial records. Looks like she's been using association funds to bankroll these little projects." I wasn't surprised. Karen had always given off the vibe of someone who thought rules were for everyone else. Now her carefully constructed empire was starting to crack. Still, I wasn't ready to celebrate just yet. HOA boards are like hydras. Cut off one head, and 2 more pop up, each one convinced they're the hero. That evening, I stepped outside to check the new motion-activated lights I'd installed along the driveway. I noticed a group of HOA members gathered near the entrance of Cypress Bend. They weren't glaring at me this time. They were arguing among themselves. I caught fragments of conversation. She went too far. What about the dues? And I told you this would backfire. I almost laughed. It was like watching a cult realize their leader wasn't a prophet, but just a lunatic with a clipboard. Later that night, I reviewed the latest footage from my cameras. Nothing unusual. No late-night intrusions, no strange vehicles. For the first time in weeks, the property was quiet, but I knew that calm didn't mean safety. The HOA had operated like a small kingdom, and kingdoms don't crumble without drama. The next morning, I received an unexpected knock on my door. It was Tom, one of the quieter residents from Cypress Bend. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before speaking. "Kevin, I just wanted you to know. We didn't all agree with what Karen did. Some of us have been trying to push her out for years. If you need anyone to testify, I'll back you up." I nodded, appreciating his candor. "Thanks, Tom. I think the sheriff's department will want to hear your side." As he left, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. Karen's downfall was about to expose years of bullying, fines, and petty power trips inside that HOA. And I had a front row seat. Court day came faster than I expected. By the time Karen's preliminary hearing rolled around, the evidence against her looked like something out of a crime documentary. The prosecutors had my footage queued up on screens, the nail boards themselves tagged and bagged, and every damning audio clip transcribed and notarized. I sat in the courtroom, calm as a coiled spring, while Karen strutted in wearing an ivory blazer, pretending like she was the queen of suburban order. Her smugness didn't last. The first video they played showed the black Ford creeping onto my property, its headlights off. The second clip captured Karen's voice instructing her crew to apply pressure until he cracks. You could feel the room shift as the audio echoed. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Karen tried to hide her reaction, but her lawyer looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. Bill, the vice president, was called in as a witness, but his attempt to protect Karen crumbled fast. Under questioning, he admitted to delivering the maintenance orders at her request. When asked why the HOA would target a property outside their jurisdiction, he stammered something about community image, which earned him a sharp look from the judge. Detective Alvarez testified next, laying out the timeline of vandalism and harassment. He also presented the HOA financial records, which showed thousands of dollars in miscellaneous expenses, the same funds used to pay for the sabotage. The courtroom murmured when he mentioned that even HOA funds were diverted to cover Karen's legal threats against me. When it was my turn, I simply told the truth. I described the letters, the vandalism, and how I caught them on camera. I didn't need to embellish. The facts were brutal enough. Karen's lawyer tried to paint me as paranoid, but the videos and timestamps spoke louder than any words. By the end of the day, the judge denied Karen's bail, citing the conspiracy evidence and witness testimony. Bill was also charged with vandalism and harassment. The HOA board members who showed up in court looked like they were attending a funeral. And maybe they were. After the hearing, Alvarez pulled me aside. "You've done more than defend your own property. You've cracked open a hornet's nest. This HOA is done." I could see it in the news already. Local reporters circling like vultures, eager to expose every rotten detail. That night, as I reviewed the day's footage, purely out of habit, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. A sliver of relief. But I knew the real battle, the one for compensation and final justice, was still ahead. The final trial lasted 3 more days, but it was nothing short of a demolition for Karen and her crew. Every witness, every piece of evidence, and every financial record slammed down like a hammer. The prosecutors painted a clear picture. This wasn't just an overzealous HOA president, but a woman who had orchestrated a harassment campaign using community funds as her personal war chest. When the jury came back, their verdict was quick and unanimous. Guilty on all counts. Karen's face hardened when the sentence was read. 9 years in prison for conspiracy, harassment, and property damage. Bill got 6 years, and 2 other board members were handed suspended sentences with heavy fines. The HOA itself was dissolved by court order. The remaining funds in its accounts were seized and allocated to a county trust for local infrastructure, a bitter but fitting end to what they called community protection. My own civil case followed soon after. With all the evidence and the criminal verdict, it wasn't even a contest. The judge awarded me $680,000 in damages, enough to repair every dent, scratch, and punctured tire, and still have plenty left over to invest in my property. My lawyer smiled when the ruling was announced. "You didn't just win, Kevin, you buried them." After the dust settled, I focused on putting my life back together. The driveway was refinished with fresh concrete, and I added heavy steel barriers at the entrance. Not because I was afraid, but because I liked the reminder that my property was mine alone. The new lighting system I installed could turn night into day with the flip of a switch, and the cameras stayed, not just for security, but because they'd become my silent allies. Word spread quickly about what had happened with Cypress Bend. I started getting calls from other neighborhoods asking for advice on how to handle their own overreaching HOAs. A few even offered me consulting contracts to set up their security systems. I took some of the work, not for the money, but for the satisfaction of helping people push back against the kind of bullying I had endured. One evening, I sat on my porch with a beer, watching the Florida sunset bleed orange and red across the horizon. My property was quiet, peaceful, the way I had imagined it when I first bought it. A new sign stood at the end of the driveway, right next to the steel barriers. "Everything here is under surveillance. Try me." For the first time in months, I felt that deep, unshakable calm I'd been craving. I didn't just win against Karen and her HOA. I had reminded them, and myself, that some lines aren't meant to be crossed.